Hello, everybody. Good morning. I wanted to jump on and promote a podcast episode that I shared to my Facebook page yesterday, and I'll share in the links below on intergenerational cross-cultural exposure to occupational science. So, as someone got touched on in yesterday's live, we looked a little bit about how sometimes the way I think of it, do you guys remember how we had a lot of dialogue around Britney Spears being placed under a conservatorship for the latter part of her career, and how we've really created a movement to give Britney Spears some autonomy from these spaces? I think on the meso and macro level, that has been the position that occupational therapy has found itself in. We, for a long time, were in a conservatorship metaphorically with the American Medical Association from our founding. We started with certificates, technicians, field medics, gradually evolved into associates, bachelor's, masters, PhDs, doctorate, the whole educational hierarchy, which just like the US healthcare system, we're very aware the access barriers in higher education also lead to all sorts of things that impede knowledge translation, accessible skilled service delivery. We're, always endlessly having controversy around admissions and whatnot. But in the medical history, there's a book from Barbara Einrich called Witches, Nurses, and Midwives that I highly recommend and would actually love to do a book group around. So if that has any interest for you, please send me a DM and let me know. I would love to set that up. The title sounds so sensational. It genuinely is spooky, the history of the US healthcare system, but it is such a concise, genuine primer on the history of the US medical system, which I guess ties into this topic quite well about the benefits of intergenerational and cross-cultural exposure to occupational science. Science, in its purest expression, is meant to be interdisciplinary. It's also meant to be cross-cultural, because it's supposed to be independent of ideology and dogma. It's supposed to be an infinitely flexible and transparent experiment for discovery of knowledge in various contexts, various lenses, with occupational science being one of them. That certainly applies to occupational science. We have different convergent strains of occupational science that have developed globally, especially in Australia. That's where we get the body of work from Anne Wilcock, Gail Whiteford, Claire Hawking. That strain really focuses on the role that occupation plays in relation to human evolution and public health, going really from that internal lens perspective and projecting it outward toward policy systems on the micro, meso, and macro level, in addition to really looking at theory. From what I understand, the Journal of Occupational Science, which is based in Australia, really has had a strong role in theorizing lately and has been a little bit more detached from looking at clinical practice application, which tends to be the historical root and focus of the strain of occupational science that has evolved out of the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, founded by Elizabeth Yerxa, Florence Clark, Ruth Zimke, few names, just a few. I got to study under Shima Krishnagiri, Mary Polly Price, John White, who are all descendants of that lineage, which also continues from Mary Riley, who Dr. Kilhoffner, that was mentioned yesterday, worked under. By the way, I have a lecture in my course from Gary Kilhoffner about the key knowledge paradigms of occupational therapy and how occupational science weaves amongst that. So if that has any curiosity, but you can see what I call the 6 degrees of separation of OS, right? And that we've already journeyed across borders. So I'm really excited. We're going to have on later this month Lynn Shaw and 2 other new board members that I haven't met from the Canadian Society for Occupational Scientists. I may have that acronym wrong. I apologize. But they currently have a call for papers open right now for a virtual conference that they're hosting for their World Occupational Science Day. They are creating space for a pretty high volume of Okay, now that I'm done with that phone call, I just wanted to finish up on promoting the episode that I'll also share in the comments is on profile in the OS Empowered OT Facebook group. This episode was a panel including Dr. Susan Burwash, who entered the field in 1979. So we have a baby boomer example. We have Karen Dwyer, who is from Generation X. We have myself as a millennial, and Anna Brunzier of Canada, who is a Gen Z OT representative. And so we had 2 OTs from the US and 2 from Canada, exploring the different interconnections between our practice and how having awareness of occupational lenses and terminology enhanced our practice. What I think is so incredible about this conversation as it evolves is we naturally see the correlations between our practice settings. Even though we work in different service systems, we were able to find that Dr. Karen Dwyer, working in home health and with Veterans Affairs in the US, was actually providing similar types of services that Anna Brunzier was through the Canadian Social Service and Community Mental Health model. So it's really revealing that being able to bring an occupational lens that's informed by cross-cultural possibility has the potential to enhance our practice and open up understanding of the type of unique services that we provide. Why this is so important is we want to get closer to the root of that core question about what the heck is occupational therapy and how is it different than other providers. What's helpful in that is getting to, the fancy word of epistemology. What is the way that knowledge is produced? And how is it a different mode of thinking? That ultimately is what differentiates occupational therapy from any other health and human service provider that also moves with clients or address different areas that their health gets impacted in different settings. So oftentimes it's just getting comfortable with this, right? It's like jumping into a calculus class. It takes a while to learn what the different functions are, what the words mean, and it's something to give a lot of compassion, a lot of grace around. Whenever we're in that kind of rigid orientation, like it's either this, or it's black and white, this is OT, or this isn't OT. No, that's a sign that we're stuck in our limbic system, right? We are limiting our view of what is possible based on the current system that we're in, often what others' beliefs are about the systems that we're in. So I'm a huge proponent of all OTs, regardless of where you live in the US, getting an understanding, a direct understanding of the different policies that you're subject to in your employment system, and separate that from your professional identity and from the way that you think as a professional and understanding. Ultimately, payers don't necessarily define what occupational therapy practice is. It's a negotiation of what can transpire. OT is an incredibly vulnerable position if we do not allow ourselves to build and develop an identity separate from these systems. And that is ultimately what gaining occupational science literacy has allowed me to do, and has allowed me to adapt a growth mindset that helps also imagine new possibilities within the constraints of the US healthcare system by networking with colleagues internationally and seeing what's going on in other countries and what possibilities we can bring here. So if any of that is of interest to you, I highly recommend checking out this episode of the Evolved Living podcast. I think it does such a spectacular job of really seeing how sharing compassion and having open minds in relation to not just other cultural perspectives, but also generational perspectives, it helps us all get on the same team. So yeah, I love this episode. I think it's such a great precursor to eventually I'm going to be having Lynn Shaw on later this month and other members of the CSOS board promoting their call for papers that is currently active. And they're going to be having a virtually accessible conference for Occupational Science Day in Canada, which I am so excited about. So please check that out below and hope everybody has a wonderful day.